see if this works. All right, looks like it's okay. Okay, so what I want to do tonight is I want to quickly go through the lecture. It's not a very long one, so we'll get that knocked out in just a minute, and then I'll spend a couple of minutes, or as long as we need to, talking about the writing assignment. Oh, thanks. Yeah. Thanks, Karina. So I missed last week, and I actually think I forgot about office hours one night. So I'm a first-time grandpa, and it's kind of stressing me out. It's cool, but yeah, because they're so little, and I'm kind of afraid to hold him. But anyway, things are going great, so appreciate that. And sorry I had to miss the one time, but I'm sure that it didn't really kill you guys for me to miss one session. So let's do the lecture first, and then we'll kind of pop right back into our couple of minutes talking about again the writing assignment for this week. So this week's chapter is going to cover some different types of reports, and we've stressed throughout the whole semester so far the importance of writing, and this week's writing assignment is going to be just a little bit more challenging. So we've done some supplementals, a couple of basic things, and now we're going to kind of step up just a little bit where we're actually going to respond to a crime and we're going to make an arrest. So there's a little bit of a twist on that. But as it relates to different types of reports, as you get into law enforcement or corrections or even private security, you're going to start to find out that there's a lot of different kinds of reports out there. And remember, everything that you write is some type of report that could be subpoenaed to court at some point. So our lecture, I really want you to kind of understand some of the different types of reports that are out there. It's not all of them, but we'll kind of hit some of the big ones and give you a couple of examples. I'll show you some reports from whether it's Rialto or Riverside County so you can kind of get a look at it. And part of what we want to continue to learn is to be able to capture that essential information by utilizing some of these report forms that are out there. And a lot of these report forms that you're going to see in a minute, they're just like the ones we've been kind of typing into, like the crime or incident face page. So there's report forms that are already created by these agencies that you're going to use. So you don't have to make things up. Those report forms are already there, and they kind of differ from agency to agency, and you'll see this. And you'll start to understand a little bit on how some of these different forms are meant to capture, I know they use the word trap, but capture is probably a better word, some critical information. And so that's kind of where we're going to go tonight. So again, not a long lecture, but it is important that we understand that there are these different types of forms. So as we know, when you get into law enforcement, it's going to require that you document things. And we've been kind of hitting on that as we've been working up, through the various weeks. And we already know that the collection and documentation of information about a specific criminal investigation and some of the forms or reports needed to accomplish this can be a little bit time consuming. And when we go over the writing assignment for this week, I'm going to show you a report that's extremely thorough. You don't have to write it as detailed as that, but I want you to see what something could look like. So we'll kind of talk a little bit about that as well. And of course, if there is a particular form that your agency uses to take a report, capture information, etc., then you're going to use that form. And again, every department has kind of a little bit of a tweak. So you kind of see the difference when I compare a couple of forms. But let's take a look at some that are typically used, some different types of forms that are kind of out there. And what we're going to talk about would be On the East Coast, they call it more of a summons, but we call it a ticket. And maybe, unfortunately, maybe you already know what a traffic ticket looks like, because you've maybe been subjected to being issued one. And I hope you haven't, but if you have, you probably know what a citation looks like. And then there's traffic crashes or accidents. There are specific forms for those. Misdemeanor and felony crimes, a lot of times agencies will combine those. Some agencies in the Midwest and even on the East Coast, they have separate forms for a misdemeanor crime and separate forms for a felony crime. And if you don't know, just to kind of give you a little bit of insight, for a misdemeanor crime, you can actually be issued a citation for most of them. There are some misdemeanors where you may not be issued a citation, but you can get what we call a cite release or a misdemeanor citation. A lot of agencies have separate forms for domestic violence in order to track that information. Some agencies have separate incident reports for things like suspicious circumstances. So you'll start to see some differences, but you'll also start to see that a lot of agencies might use one report form for several different types of reports. So just kind of keep that in mind. And some other ones that are out there, forms that maybe you've heard the terminology before. There's something called a CHP 180, and that is basically when a vehicle gets towed or impounded. There's special forms for DUI, or what we call 11550 of the Health and Safety Code, which is under the influence. There's a form for that. And sometimes those forms have little things for you to fill in. I'll show you what they look like. There's even, and this is technically a report, what we call an FI card or a field interview card. So here's an example of what an FI card might look like. And these are technically a report. And they're used a lot in law enforcement. Same with a gang card or what we call a booking form, which is if you were to be arrested and you're booked into the local jail, the officer who made the arrest will fill out that booking form. And it's got some medical questions and things like that. And I'll show you what a booking form looks like. And there's even what they call an MO form. So kind of modus operandi, meaning how an individual may commit a crime, etc. So there's a lot of different forms. And again, we'll take a peek at some of these as we kind of go through this lecture. So starting off with citations, as a law enforcement officer, patrolling and enforcing the laws within whatever jurisdiction you work in, you may be required to perform what they call directed patrol or traffic, if you will, or proactive traffic enforcement. So there's a couple of different types. Proactive enforcement is a practice where the police officer basically he or she enforces traffic laws in their area of patrol without any specific direction or directive. You're in your normal patrol area and you might see somebody committing a traffic violation, and therefore you're going to act accordingly and make a traffic stop or not. It depends on how you kind of run your particular patrol function or your patrol beat. So this is what we call proactive. You're not responding to calls. There might be a gap in between the time of calls. And so you're going to basically enforce some traffic laws. And then we have what we call directed traffic enforcement. And this is a little bit different. This is a practice where a police officer might be directed or assigned by a supervisor or someone else to monitor and enforce traffic violations that are occurring in a specific area. And an example I use, you might be directed to a certain location because of complaints of speeding vehicles or maybe even collisions. So there might be a lot of crashes at a certain intersection, and therefore you're going to be directed to, hey, go work this intersection and deal with some of the speeding vehicles. A lot of complaints we get a lot of times might be in a school zone where people are just kind of ripping through the school zone, etc. So you might send some motor officers out there to write a few tickets in order to kind of detour people from speeding through a school zone, etc. So that's more of a directed traffic enforcement. And, this is, while it's outdated, it's important to know that a lot of contacts, a lot of them actually, are through traffic stops. And so, traffic is a kind of a really big thing. You can make a lot of arrests also working traffic, because a lot of individuals that commit certain crimes or carry drugs from point A to point B, or guns, or etc., they use a car in order to do that function. So working traffic, it's not just all about citations. A lot of times your investigations can lead to something else. So Department of Justice put something out a while ago, back in 2008, and back then it basically said about 43% of all contacts with law enforcement and the public is via traffic. So that is kind of one thing to consider. They don't have a lot of updated information on that, but and if I find any, I'll pass it on to you. And here's a couple of reports. There was one that was put out in 2015 that basically talked about contacts between police and the public. And I kind of broke it down a little bit. And I have the links down at the bottom. So if by chance you're interested, you can go to the link in there and you can click on it, and you can actually look at the document if you want to. So pretty good information. So your textbook shows, here's an example of what a ticket looks like. So you can see that it's technically a report. So kind of remember that. So what you write in there needs to be accurate. It doesn't have a lot of narrative to it, right? But it's a fill in the box, but you want to be as detailed as possible in case the person doesn't show up, or if it's a speeding ticket or a stop sign ticket, you want to detail what happened. And so this is kind of one from kind of a back east department. I think I have a better one here. And a lot of the traffic tickets, if you flip them over on the back, there's some lined areas for you to write some information. Some agencies require what they call a probable cause affidavit on the back of their ticket, or it's even a separate form. Typically, California does not for that, but it's pretty simple. And you can see here, and you can even write this on the back of a ticket here in California. Like I said, on the back, there's some lines on there for you to write on if the person was argumentative, or if you had anything else to add as a result of the traffic stop. But the probable cause here for the stop was basically this officer clocked someone on radar going 65 and a 50. And that was enough for them to stop the individual, right? Because they're going a little bit too fast. A California citation looks a little different. It looks like this. And I didn't put in the other copy of the ticket, but on the back of this yellow copy right here, so this is the front. So here's a citation from Rialto. So it's Inland Empire, but typically California sites will look like this. You can see at the top, it's got the date of violation, the time, the day of the week. If it's a misdemeanor, so you can see here, traffic, non-traffic, misdemeanor. So if it's a misdemeanor and you want to cite the person out, you may have to write a report still, so the case number would go there. You got the person's personal info, their name, address, their city. If they're a juvenile, their driver's license number, the class. So if they ride a motorcycle, there's going to be a different class, or commercial vehicle. Information on the car. Okay, so the license plate, the year of the vehicle, etc. Evidence of insurance, the registered owner. And then here would be the violation. And again, if it's a misdemeanor, the officer would circle it and write the section. If it's an infraction, which most traffic tickets are, not all, but a lot are, you would circle the I for infraction. And then here on the left side, you would see correctable or not. So it could be like a window tint citation. Is it correctable? You could check yes. And then if somebody got that tint fixed, they could have it signed off by an officer, and that would be on this part right here. And you would pay an administrative fee, and they would sign the citation off. If speed needs to be indicated, you can see that there's some speed here. Okay. I'll get to your question, Dale. There's weather, and that's important because if it's raining and they're going 55 and a 25, that's a little bit worse, right? Because it's, wet outside, etc. Direction of travel, if you need to indicate a direction of travel, and then a little box here that says violation not committed in my presence. But typically, most traffic citations are committed in your presence. And then at the end, it's always good to note, especially when you issue a citation, because a lot of people aren't happy. It says right here, it's not admitting guilt, it's just a promise to appear. So if somebody doesn't want to sign the ticket, you would just let them know, hey, look, you're not admitting guilt, you're just signing it that you're going to appear in court, etc. So, okay, so back to the question, Dale, go ahead.
Okay, so I am aware that most traffic infractions don't really stay on your record for the driver, but is there a way that the police keep track of like who gets what speeding ticket and how long ago it was?
Some departments might have an internal computer system that tracks that. DMV, so if you get a speeding ticket, that could stay on your record for a little bit, like on your insurance. Usually it's about 3 years and stuff starts to drop off. Same with a traffic accident. But other infractions typically don't show up in a department's computer, but it depends how detailed they are with their computer systems. So I know that may not totally answer your question, but most traffic infractions aren't. They're not going to show up on your criminal history or something like that. So, but a lot of internal systems, they will enter those citations into an internal computer system, and they have the ability to track those. So hopefully
Okay.
that helps.
Okay. Yeah. That kind of works, but thanks.
Okay. All right. So we talk a little bit about traffic crashes, and again, depending upon your department policy, some prefer collision, some prefer crashes, some prefer accidents. So again, it's kind of a policy thing on how you want to phrase that. But understand that traffic enforcement during a shift of duty can involve investigating a traffic crash as they occur. So a lot of agencies have a traffic unit, and their job would be to handle all the traffic collisions throughout the day. A lot of times it's a motor officer or officers. But if there's none on shift or they're busy, you may be called upon as a patrol officer to take a traffic crash. And motor vehicle crashes can range in severity from very minor property damage with no injuries at all to really severe incidents with major property damage and even fatalities. So that's why, again, it's very, very important when it comes to documenting your traffic accident report, because more than likely there could be not just issues with insurance, but if it's a severe accident, it could be a lawsuit pending. So again, your report is going to be kind of scrutinized as it goes through the process. So don't think that just because it's a traffic crash, hey, it's no big deal. The insurance companies will fight it out. Well, your report's going to be the document that they're going to fight over. So it's really important that you understand how to document just like you would a criminal investigation. So you have to be very detailed. Some agencies even have some very kind of expert individuals. They call them MATE teams, and you can look on the back of this guy's shirt right here. It's Major Accident Investigation Team is what that stands for. And these are individuals that are trained on reconstruction. So these are the ones, the officers that you would call out for fatalities or major critical incidents. A lot of times your MATE team will come out for an airplane crash. So if you have a helicopter go down or a small airplane go down, they will come out and they'll do the investigation on that, because they have all these cool 3D scanner devices and things like that. And I'll show you a couple of diagrams on what they do. Um, it's not necessarily a branch of CSI, Dale, so that's a good question. Um, it's kind of a separate unit. So Rialto, we weren't that large of an agency. We're kind of a medium agency, but we had our own individual mate team, and they're on call 24/7, and they respond to all fatalities. Maybe you could kind of consider CSI, but for traffic, but they're actually a separate component. So if there's a regular crime scene, you're not going to call out your mate folks. But if it's a vehicle related or a train versus vehicle, train versus ped, something involving a motor vehicle, etc., then you're going to call out your mate folks. So it can get pretty high tech. And I'll show you a couple of diagrams at the end. Traffic collision reports look a little different depending upon where you are in the state. This one was out of your textbook. And it's I'll show you a California one in a minute, but it's kind of the same thing as a crime report, but it's just laid out differently, and it has little diagrams of the vehicle where you can mark where damage is. So, and then here's basically kind of a short traffic accident report, and really all you need would be statements from the drivers and a small investigation on what the officer found. A lot of times you have to draw a very small diagram. Nothing big, it can be a very small sketch. So here's what a California report looks like. So, and the reason is almost every department in California uses this, because you look up here, this is a CHP driven report, okay? And it's the state of California, Department of California Highway Patrol. So almost every agency I know of in California is going to document a collision using this report, because these are the reports that end up getting sent to DMV, etc. And you can see it's got some similar data blocks, right? If you were to type into this, it talks about, special conditions. Was anybody injured? Is it a hit and run? Where did it happen at? The date, the time, or between what intersection? Here's the driver one information, and then their registration, etc. Driver two. And then if there's more people involved, just like if we would have a crime report, there might be an additional person. If there's 3 vehicles involved, then it would be here. And there's extra sheets that go along with that if you have 5 vehicles involved. Imagine some of those reports that you've seen some of the articles or news reports where there's been like a 50-car pileup. That's a big time report. It's going to take a long time. You're going to have a lot of people's information in there. But it does happen where you get snow whiteouts. So Marcy, it's like a face sheet, but for traffic. So it's a type into form, or in the olden days, we used to handwrite that in there. But now with all the computers and things like that, officers can type into these. On the back, so that was the front. Now on the back, there's a little bit of information. And you can see here, it talks about where people are seated. It talks about what the primary collision factor is. And just like you see in a crime report a little bit, but it's geared more towards traffic. Weather conditions. How was the lighting? What about the roadway surface? Were there any traffic controls? And the crash, was it between a vehicle versus pedestrian, another vehicle, etc.? Bicycle, animal, fixed object, like did it hit a power pole? Was it a train? Was there a pedestrian involved? Any other special information? And here is a very basic sketch. And really all you're going to do is basically show the direction of travel for vehicle 1 and vehicle 2 and where they hit. So you don't have to be too detailed, because this is basically kind of a short form traffic collision. If it was a fatal, it's going to be a reconstruction. Your mate team is going to do that, and you won't end up having to hopefully do that. A lot of these, if you don't have a mate team, you might actually call another agency that might have a mate team to come out and do the reconstruction on your crash. So this is kind of a California looking traffic collision form. Okay, so misdemeanor and felony crimes, misdemeanor, summons and complaint forms are used for criminal cases, which could result in a jail sentence. of less than a year, or a fine, or even a traffic ticket, or a ticket, a citation. Okay. A lot of agencies, again in California, they use the same forms for a misdemeanor and a felony. It's the same crime template that you guys have been typing, the little boxes. It's the face pages. Okay. So some agencies, Midwest and kind of on, East Coast, might have a separate form for a misdemeanor and a separate one for a felony. California is a little easier. We kind of use the same thing. But one thing is pretty much the same when it comes to an arrest. There's going to be what they call a probable cause affidavit. And I'm going to show you what that looks like at the end of the lecture. And it's not some big, huge thing. So I don't want you to get stressed out. It basically documents the reason, the probable cause to arrest the person. You're not rewriting your whole report, okay? You're going to write your crime report, and then there's going to be a little form that you're going to send with that person over to the jail when they get booked into the jail that tells the jail supervisor, hey, this was my probable cause for taking this person into custody. And again, I'll show you how simple it is. Here's an example from your textbook. This is the front of a misdemeanor complaint form. So again, it's a little different than California. Okay. So part of the complaint form, again, is going to be this very small probable cause summary. And it applies for both misdemeanors and felonies, unless you issue the person a ticket. So a misdemeanor ticket. If you issue somebody a misdemeanor citation, you can release them at the scene or you can book them at the county jail, but they're going to be site released from the jail on your ticket. So I know that's kind of a lot to kind of take in, but just know that misdemeanor or felony, you're going to have to do this probable cause affidavit. This one's a little bit long. And again, this is kind of from back east a little bit. As I'll show you at the end of the lecture, RPC forms out here are actually pretty short. And you'll see. So we here in California, we use the form that you guys have been kind of typing into. Now, this is Rialto PD's form. It's pretty similar to a lot of other forms that are out there for crime reports. But we use it for everything, whether it's a crime, an incident, a suspicious person, a misdemeanor, or a felony, because here we have this little place for the code section. So it can be a misdemeanor or a felony. It really doesn't matter. So you can see here, F/M, felony or misdemeanor. So we don't have all these different separate forms. And you've already seen this form, right? You've typed into it already. Here's what a probable cause form looks like. So whenever you make an arrest on a person and it's not going to be a site release, okay, you're going to have to fill this form out and you send it with the person over to county jail if they're going to get booked. And typically, if you're not going to site release them, that's where they're going to go. And all they're asking for are the facts establishing the elements and the identification of the person, basically a paragraph on your probable cause for thinking that this person committed the crime. And again, when I get to the end, don't panic. You're not rehashing your report. It's a very simple paragraph, okay? But this is what they call a PC form. For felony crimes, it's the same thing. We know that they need to be, accurate, etc. Felony crimes are typically those that could end up, the arrestee could end up, being sent to prison or more than a year, okay, in jail. And we already know that they need to be accurate. This is the example in your textbook of a felony report. We use the same one. And typically, again, in California, a lot of times you're going to use the same thing. And you've already seen this, right? You've seen this face page. You've already typed into it. You've seen the additional persons page. You've seen the third page that talks about offenses, property, vehicles, and you've seen the evidence page. So you've already kind of been exposed to this. And we would use the same probable cause form for a felony, just like we would a misdemeanor. Okay? So hopefully that kind of makes sense to everybody, but we'll kind of clear it up at the end. A couple of minutes on domestic violence crimes. A lot of states have mandatory arrest in any domestic violence incident involving an injury. For many agencies, you would use the standard crime incident form, the one like the Rialto example. Uh, you would use that same thing in order to make an arrest for domestic violence. But some agencies might have their own form. So just note that they could have their own special form. So here's one from Monroe Police Department. They have their own domestic violence form. That's okay. It'd be the same thing as an arrest face page, but it's on a different form. So just kind of note that. And they would do a probable cause thing. So you can kind of see what they look like. Incident reports, these are typically, involve crimes or calls for service that maybe they don't fit into a clear niche of a criminal case. But it might just be, something kind of out of the ordinary, maybe a suspicious person or an industrial accident. That could be an incident, right? Somebody gets injured at a kind of at a warehouse or severely injured or something like that. And it's not a crime, but you need to document it. That could be done on an incident report form. If you look at the Rialto example, we would still use the same face page. It's just an incident. It's not a crime, if that kind of makes sense, right? So some things that could be incident reports, like I said, it could be some type of industrial injury. It could be a child custody thing. It could be, kind of a civil disagreement between parties, like somebody chopped down somebody's tree hanging over into their backyard, things like that. So these are some common situations. This is an example from your textbook where they have their own little incident face page, similar to the one I gave you for Rialto. Same with suspicious circs. Okay. The only difference is that an incident, report is kind of non-criminal, and it could be, maybe you caught someone coming out from behind a building in the middle of the night, and they had in their possession a flashlight and a crowbar. Maybe you don't have enough to arrest them, but you could write a suspicious circ report, or you could do an FI card, which is, we've already kind of talked about FI cards a little bit. So to document the fact that you stopped someone in the middle of the night. This is a standard FI card. And we use these a lot where maybe you don't have enough to make an arrest, but it's kind of suspicious on why they were there or what they were doing. So you would fill in all of their information, and then you could flip it over if there's a vehicle involved, any gang or anything like that. And this would be put into computer system to be used later if needed. Go ahead, Scott.
Would you have to actually detain the suspect to get the information for the FI, or is that just something that you want under like a mutual consent?
It could be either or. So if you have, if you're able to articulate, so if you have reasonable suspicion. So here, I'll give you the scenario that I always do, and that's a great question. Middle of the night, 2 in the morning, somebody is parked behind a business that's closed at 2 in the morning, and you roll up there to check on them to see why they're there because nobody else is there, and they're just sitting there in their car for no reason. That would be enough to where you have some reasonable suspicion to ask them why they're there, because you don't see any other cars there. If it were during the daytime and somebody just kind of looks hinky, you have to be able to articulate a reason to detain them. Or you could consensually contact them and ask them, hey, you got a minute? Where are you going? What's up? And if, mind if I talk to you for a minute? You would have to do it like that. So it'd have to be more consensual. So it's very circumstantial. But a lot of times, or let's say you get to maybe a call of a gang party or something, and somebody says that they hear some gunshots, and you get there and you just want to identify people. Maybe you can't find any victims, but you would have enough to basically FI everybody, if that kind of makes sense. Does that sort of answer your question?
Kinda. It was just more along the lines of like, what grounds do you have to actually get someone to give you that information without detaining them is more along the lines. I should have asked that a little bit better.
Yeah, you really need to fill one of these out completely. You're going to need their consent or enough reasonable suspicion to actually detain them. Otherwise, you're kind of out of luck. Yeah. So yeah, there is a little fine line in there. So you do have to be careful and make sure that you can articulate the reason that you're filling out one of these particular cards. So we talk about suspicious circumstances, a lot of common things. Again, suspicious vehicles, maybe driving around the neighborhood, people loitering in the neighborhood, maybe contacting an adult near a school and they really don't have any business there. These are all things that sometimes end up, in that suspicious category. Somebody knocking on doors in the middle of the night, pretending to be the cable, selling Verizon or something like that, but it's after dark and they're knocking on doors. These are all little things that you might document maybe on an FI card, or you could actually write a little small suspicious person report or something. It really depends on your agency's protocol and policy. And here's an example of kind of a different department's suspicious circ report. Again, we have a lot of California agencies use kind of one report and they just title it what they're going to title it. So really some tips just to kind of remember, acquaint yourself with what types of report forms are available and appropriate to use. And that's going to be your policy, depending upon what department you work for, how they want you to document things, and to what different degree. There's a lot of different report forms out there, kind of like I talked about. Your agency, a lot of times these departments will come up with these forms that are all pre-designed for you to use, so you don't have to handwrite this long drawn out report. You can just check the boxes, but you still need to be accurate when you use these. I talked about a CHP 180 earlier. If we're going to tow a car, this is what a report looks like in California. This is a CHP, and it's, again, Highway Patrol, so almost every agency in California is going to use this car. It's going to give all the description of the vehicle, the VIN number, the registered owner. It talks about what tow company towed it and where it went. You can note any damage down here. If it was a stolen vehicle, and here, stored, impounded, released, recovered. So this is the report form, but you still have to articulate some things because it's technically a report. Missing person reports, a lot of these are kind of like what you see here. They're fill in the box. There's not this big long narrative that goes with it. There's just a lot of data. And a lot of times you may even attach a photograph to this report. So missing person reports. Talked about an MO report. Agencies sometimes have check the box MO reports. Maybe it goes along with your FI card or something, but you can just go down here and check all that apply on how somebody committed a particular crime, their pattern. We talked about a booking report. So if you can see there's a lot of paperwork that goes along with this. If somebody gets arrested and they go to, let's say, county jail, this is what you have to fill out in order to get them booked into county jail. You'll still do your own agency report form, but this is basically what we call a booking form. You'll fill in the arrestee's information, etc., the charge, you can see the definition, any injuries or anything that may have happened, emergency notifications. Did they have any property with them? You're going to have to inventory their property. So there's a lot that goes into making an arrest that you kind of don't see on TV, because all you see is the cool stuff. Yeah, Dale.
Okay, sorry about that.
That's okay.
Is it common to have discrepancies between injuries from when you initially arrest someone to when you have them booked? Like in the case of like a cop killer suspect who, puts up a slight fight and then gets arrested, and then they take him down and they interview him, and then they take him from there to the booking. Could there be discrepancies, or is it common to have discrepancies between the two injuries from the two sites?
I mean, I wouldn't say it's common, but I would say that, sometimes people, when they, if you were to be tased with a taser, people have different reactions at different times. If you're struck, a bruise could happen a little bit later. I mean, different things could happen. So it's not always super common. But if there's any injuries, whenever anybody is booked, you're supposed to take photographs. And that's a really big thing. So that way you can document the fact via photograph to the best you can that, hey, when I arrested this person, he had a scratch on his face and that's all I saw. So when he gets over to county jail, if he's got more than a scratch, then maybe we need to look into that or something. And if an officer is in a scuffle, we also take pictures of the officer. So that way we can show that there's a torn uniform or a scratch on the officer's face, things like that. So it doesn't happen that often, but I wouldn't want to say that it never happens. Because when you get over to the jails have nurses and they have an on-call doctor and nurses that basically evaluate your arrestee when you bring them over to make sure that they're okay to be booked. Because if they're injured, to a certain level, the jail won't take them. You'll have to get them, basically what we call it is a jail check. So you have to take them to the hospital, have them cleared first before you can have them booked into the county jail. So hopefully that kind of answered your question a little bit.
Yes, it did.
Okay. So this is the booking app again, just to kind of show you. This is what we call, this is a report template from Highway Patrol that basically is a DUI or under the influence form. There's not a lot of narrative to it, but it's got a lot of check the boxes for the different tests that you might do for a DUI individual. This is a Riverside Sheriff's Department DUI form that you can actually type into. So again, a lot of this stuff is check the box. Vehicle involved, lighting, eyes, his breath, his or her, their face, standing, eyes, speech, the walk the line test that we tend to do. Next week, we're going to actually go over DUIs. So we'll start to familiarize ourselves with how to document someone that's under the influence, etc., because that's really important as well. We talked about gang cards already, or field interview cards. Rialto kind of changed theirs up a little bit, so they're either FI cards or a gang card. And gang cards are important as well because they basically document gang membership. Sometimes self-admitted, sometimes maybe not self-admitted. Here's the same type of a gang card by the Sheriff's Department. So you can see that here's one that's filled out by an individual. And it's, it lists any type of, tattoos or things like that. It's got a little room for narrative here on the back. And they're really important when it comes to the jail, because when anybody gets booked into county jail, they do a screening for gang membership. And that's really important. And I'll get to the question about how do we fill out a gang card if it's not self-admitted. A lot of times we can do it based on their history, based on the fact that they're maybe wearing a blue rag, a green rag, a red rag, a purple rag, and the tattoos on them as well. But when they go to county jail, for sure they're going to admit which gang they might be in, because they could end up in the wrong place in the jail, if that makes any sense. Because you don't want to put a Crip gang member in a cell with a blood gang member, right? Because that doesn't. So a lot of times, especially the prisons, and people are kind of wondering, well, how do they do that? Well, because they're gonna be a little bit more forthcoming when it comes to jail or prison, because they don't want to be put in the wrong place. And all of this is going to be discoverable if you ever have to go to court against this individual. So if this person here says, well, I'm not a gang member, I could actually go back to the jail booking and show, hey, when they went to county jail, they admitted that they were a gang member, and they said they were with 4, 5, 6 Piru, Pomona Bloods, etc. Oh, and by the way, and you can see here when they classify individuals, they'll classify them here again by gangs, etc., self-admitted or what have you, but in jail they will, and then they sign it. So, and you can see here, this is important for us, for gang investigators later on. It's going to show, hey, this guy's Eastside Santa Paula with the moniker of Rambo, etc. So this is good stuff for us later on, should this person get out of jail, and or if he was, involved in some type of crime, we can go back and say, hey, look, this guy admitted when he went to county jail or to prison his gang involvement. So we can use that later on. So that kind of wraps up the different types of report forms that I wanted to show you guys. And let me all right. So let me do this. I'm going to stop sharing for a second. And, well, maybe I won't. All right, here we go. All right, so I want to show you guys a couple of different things so we can all be on the same page as far as the writing assignment goes. All right, whenever I kind of share the screen like this, you guys kind of end up in a very small square. Can someone still hear me? Can everyone hear me? Okay, good. All right, thanks. All right, so our writing assignment for this particular week is going to be an arrest. All right, I'm going to kind of walk you through it and show you a couple of examples as well. It's nothing different than what you've done with a little bit of an addition. Okay, so just like in some of the other scenarios that we had, this is going to be a commercial burglary. So we already know it. Now I put the section in here for you to look at just so you know what the elements are, etc. But it's going to be a commercial burglary because the person basically breaks into a bar, okay? And you're going to get a call. So you're going to respond to a possible burglary in progress after the alarm company calls, and you're going to locate someone inside of this business, okay? And you're going to use the same report forms that you did before. You're going to use the face pages, and you're going to use a narrative. One additional heading that you'll probably have is going to be arrest, because we're going to arrest someone, right? Also, you're going to do what we call a probable cause affidavit. And I've got some information on that down at the bottom right here, and I even have the forms. The actual form is actually right here, okay? So let me show you what these look like, okay? So that way you guys don't kind of stress out on me. So this is one example of a probable cause form. This isn't the one that we're going to use. I'm going to make it easy on you, but this is Riverside County's. And again, it's something very small, and all we're asking for is, what are the facts that make you believe that this person committed the crime? So it's super, super simple. You can see Riverside County's has some information up here that you type into, and then here's the narrative part. This is the San Bernardino County one.
We can't see the form.
You can't see it. All right. I'm glad you told me that. So let me, I appreciate that. The share screen must have come off. So let's try it again. How about now?
I can see it now.
All right, good.
Good.
All right, so let me go back then real quick. Well, this is the one I want you to use. This is the San Bernardino County one. You're going to put the arrestee's name here and the charges, the date and time of arrest, etc. And you're not going to need any more than this. It's a template that you can type into. If you can't use the template, just type it on a plain Word doc. It's going to be about a paragraph long, okay? And all you're going to do, again, is just indicate the facts establishing that this person is the one involved in criminal activity. And I think I might be able to, let me see if this is the Riverside County one, so just so you can see the difference. Riverside County has a 2-page one. It's got the arrestee's information and stuff up here. And then this is where you would type in the information. Okay. So I don't want you to panic. I'm going to show you a full-blown report that a student did. You don't have to do it as detailed as this, but I wanted to at least show you what it could end up looking like. And then I'm going to go back and I'll show you a very short example of a probable cause declaration. So for our report, you're going to use the face pages, right? Because there's a crime. You'll fill in as much information as you can. It's going to be a commercial burglary. Okay, so we have the date and time, and you can make up the date and time, the location. The description is commercial burglary. Here's the code section. It's a felony. Okay, remember, completed or attempt. Well, this person completes the crime. Your victim is going to be the bar, the actual company, okay? Or you can make up the victim's name, the person who owns the business, whichever one you want, okay? That's okay. Your suspect is going to be the individual that gets arrested, and you can, I'm not sure if it has his name in there, but you can always make up a name and his address. You're the reporting officer. Now, this student added some witnesses in. You don't have to have any witnesses, okay? So it can just be the reporting party, the victim, and the suspect. If you want to add more in there, you can, but here you can see she put in the owner of the bar. She put the bar as the victim and the owner as the witness, and that's fine too. Okay. Here you can see some property that she ended up putting in here that was recovered, because when you watch the scenario, you'll see that there's some property involved. So we have some property, and it was recovered at the scene. No vehicles involved, no drugs involved. And then again, she went a little bit, I wouldn't say overboard, but it's super detailed. She booked photos of the crime scene, which is important to do. She found some fingerprints, all right? So, she decided to put those in there. You don't have to, but I want you to see the different headings. Stay on top of your headings, okay? So your notification is going to be, and we'll kind of walk through hers just briefly. On this date and time, her partner and the officer that's writing the report, this is Mary Rangel. They're dispatched to a possible burglary in progress at this bar, okay? And the alarm company, because it's a silent alarm that goes off. All right? The investigation part starts right when they get there, because when they get there, they observe the front door of this business to be open, okay? They go inside the bar and they find an individual sitting on the floor inside of the building. And then they describe the person, etc. They pat him down and they detain him, okay? And then he makes a statement while patting him down. He says that he's homeless and he was looking for a place to sleep. Okay, so that's kind of interesting, because now if he just wandered in and he's homeless, he's looking for a place to sleep, how do you establish that it's an actual burglary then? Because is it a trespass or a burglary? So she puts the suspect information here, which it's already on your face page, so you don't have to put it here, but if you like the way she does this, you can. She also puts the victim information here, but it's already on the face page. So she kind of duplicated her effort, but that's her style of kind of writing, so that's okay. So she goes on to say that, the owner of the business arrives on scene, and she asks the owner if anybody is supposed to be inside the business, and he says no. But then she discovers some property that's stacked up next to a window or next to a door. And my question to you would be, if someone went into a place just to get warm, why would there be some property stacked up next to a window or a door? That doesn't make sense, right? The thought would be is maybe that person moved it and they were actually going to take it, because the victim here says, hey, that stuff wasn't there or like that before. So now you're establishing the elements of the possible burglary, okay? So she sees that there's this stuff that's stacked up next to the window or the door. I can't remember. She takes pictures of the evidence, and again, she decides to put in some fingerprints. She kind of went a little bit much. I'm not asking you to do that. And she puts the probable cause in, which you don't really have to do. The new section or heading you're going to get is this: arrest. Here, she decides that she has enough probable cause to arrest this person. So she puts him under arrest for burglary. He wants his attorney before he's going to say anything. So that's the end of it right there. Okay. And then your evidence that you recover and your recommendations. So she goes on again, and you don't have to do this, but I'm just showing you how detailed it could get. Here is information from ADT Security about the alarm. Here is the match on the fingerprint cards. Again, this is kind of way over the top, but it's still great. Here's a little sketch of where the items were found stacked by the door compared to where the suspect was sitting. Here's her photographs that she took of the items stacked next to the door. So I'm not asking you to do all this, but I'm showing you what it could be like. And here is her probable cause declaration. Now she goes on a little bit more than you probably need to, because I'm going to show you a shorter one. Okay. So I know that was a lot to kind of look at, but let me show you one that's a little bit shorter. I think I have it right. Let's see here. Let me see if I can find it. Here it is. Come on. Okay. So this is for a carjacking, and you can see how short it is. So it's kind of an example for you. The arrestee is John Smith. It's a armed robbery and a carjacking. And really all you're doing is putting in enough to show that the person that you're arresting is in fact the suspect in the crime. So this officer decides to ride on this date at this time. He responds to this address on a report of a carjacking. He gets there, he contacts the victim, who said, kind of tells her, that, hey, I was at the ATM when the person approached her vehicle. Victim didn't know the vehicle. The person tells her to get out of the car and fear her for life. She gets out of the car. Then she sees this person get in the driver's seat of the car and leave with her vehicle. So, there's really not that much to it, right? The person drives erratically, collides into a planter, and then he gets out and he starts to run. The officers end up finding him. And on his possession, they find the victim's ATM card. So it's not a lot. It's a short paragraph synopsis that basically says, here's my probable cause for showing this person is the one I believe that committed the crime. So for our instance, it's going to be pretty simple, because you're going to get a call of a burglary alarm. You're going to get there. You're going to find something. You're going to see the doors open. You're going to detain a person inside of the business. And when you check out the location, you're going to find some property stacked by the back door. You're going to contact the owner, and this person's not supposed to be inside the business or have permission to take any of the property. That's it. You don't have to go into this big, long dissertation. Does that kind of make sense to everybody? It's just enough to establish the elements of burglary, and that dude inside of the business is the one you believe that did it. That's all they're asking for. So does that kind of make sense to everybody? It shouldn't be too kind of far out there. Remember to use your headings, okay? Use the notification, use your investigation or observations, whichever heading you prefer right there. But make sure you investigate. This one is the only difference here is remember you have a crime and a crime scene. If you want to put more in there and say you found fingerprints, hey, that's great. If you don't, that's okay too. You don't have to find any fingerprints, but just make sure you establish the elements of the crime and that you describe, the evidence where it was found, etc. And make sure you put in there the part about the owner of the business saying that the person wasn't supposed to be in there, because that's a essential element of this particular crime. Any questions? Let me stop the share then. Okay, I will be available for office hours tomorrow. So the usual thing, if anybody has any further questions or anything, I'm just making sure that I take roll by taking a picture of everyone that's logged in on the right hand side. So I'm not like getting your photos or anything. I'm just okay. All right. If there's any issues or anything, you can email me. But remember, we're going to start picking up the pace a little bit now. So this is going to call for a little bit more detail, because now you got a crime scene. So if you have a crime scene, you're supposed to investigate the crime scene. If you want your suspect to talk, you can Mirandize him and talk to him. If you don't want him to talk, you can Mirandize him and he says nothing. So you pick. But just make sure you're as detailed as possible, okay? Because again, we're going to start getting a little bit more technical. And if you have any questions, you can email me or you can pop into office hours tomorrow night. Anything else for the good?